This is update for October 3, 2022, day 222 of the war, end of the date update. I'm gonna just jump again straight to the military situation, and this is it's important. There is quite a bit of action going on, so let's just jump in. So we'll start with the typical walkthrough, starting from the very north along the state border. Situation more or less, call it stable or relatively subdued, not terribly much going on. Now let's jump to the North Luhansk front line. This is where, well, one of the places where things are happening these days. So what is happening is what we discussed before. Russian troops are pulling out from this Borova salient. Essentially, they are at this point here along this road that goes from Kupiansk to Kreminna. It goes obviously more to Donetsk, but we're just looking at this stretch, right? So far, based on information, Ukrainian troops still sort of stuck here at this Kuzemivka. This is sort of where Russian troops are trying to build new front line here, west of Svatove. This units here on the eastern side of this, I think the river is called Zherebets. On the eastern side of this river, they also pulling actively, actually even more behind this road to the eastern side of this river that goes to Svatov. I forgot the name. But the key point is there is no contiguous front line here. Like we see all of this, there's simply no contiguous front line. In even Russian military administration in Svatove issued an announcement asking everyone to evacuate who can. Let's put it this way. That's probably a better way to say who can in 72 hours. So and then I'll explain you, and then we'll see why this is happening. So apparently Ukrainian reconnaissance units and commander units are definitely actively sort of operating on this road. So Russian troops will not be able to basically build the front line here on this road, and they actually managed to attack this village Krasnorichenske, where there is fighting going on, and it looks like it's, based on unconfirmed reports, is in Ukrainian hands right now. So essentially, they established a bridgehead on the eastern side of, I forgot again, this river basically that goes through from Svatove to Kreminna. So again, this means that Russian troops will not be able to establish normal front line again, and this is also means that. And that's why you hear this evacuation sort of requests from Russian military administration in Svatove to everyone, because those who collaborated with Russian military administration, most of them typically flee. So next sort of stop is Starobilsk. As you can see, this is large logistical hub at this point for all Russian troops, including operating near Bakhmut. So, and this is going to be sort of one of the larger prizes. So at this point, the sort of destiny of Svatove has been decided. And just to kind of highlight why this is happening, because there's simply not enough infantry in this Russian units. What you see here are just sort of numbers on the map, but basically they are shadow themselves. So it's just remnants of those units. So they're not able simply build a contiguous front line on this whatever it is, stretch of 80 kilometers or something like that. And that's why Ukrainian troops basically, or reconnaissance units, are able to infiltrate and then build bridgeheads and then sort of attack from those, because majority of the units are still being like sort of pulling. Ukrainian troops are not even like sort of main regular parts of the units are not even facing Kreminna at this point. So this is probably part of the Again, problem in Ukrainian side that this is super slow. And as you can see from the number of units, this is really big concentration of forces here. There's even 66 Brigade has been pulled here to this area. So again, this clearly tells us that Ukrainian command has big plans for the future here. And as what we discussed before, the point is not really storming this Svatove, Starobinsk. The point is attacking, kind of like moving in this direction. And one sort of part will attack Starobinsk. Even if it's not gonna be liberated right away, it essentially will prevent it from being used as logistical hub. Once Ukrainian troops approach somewhere close enough, this is it. You need to reroute Russian logistics through a much more larger distance. Probably Belovodsk could be another sort of base. We'll see, but that's but the bigger move is probably going to be directed towards southeast, basically. Essentially trying to create very uncomfortable situation of potential encirclement for Russian troops here in this, like where the Bakhmut, where the Wagner mercenaries operating, Severodonetsk, Rubizhne, and essentially forcing evacuation of this whole area without terribly much fighting. So this is kind of like long sort of big plans, let's put this way. So far, this is just a small step in establishing this tiny bridgehead. But as I said, against this number of troops, Russian side does not have enough simply, and they will be collapsing sort of, new line after new line. It will be collapsing until reserve units will arrive in sufficient quantity, and that's again big question when they will arrive. And big unknown. But so far, Ukrainian troops are continuing exploiting this situation. Now let's that's just a quick kind of like look how this whole developing, starting on 23rd, 24th, 26th, 27. This is essentially again forcing Russian troops to evacuate Liman, and this is well, not forcing, but obviously this was an attempt to create pocket. And this is something I would like to highlight, is that it's nearly impossible to encircle troops unless the command allows that to happen. So as you can see in this whole area, Izum, Balaklia, Kupiansk, Russian troops managed to escape. Yet they lost a lot of equipment, they lost some of the soldiers, but the backbone, the majority of the units was successfully pulled out, even in last second, let's put this way. The same happened in Liman. Yes, they lost some and so on. At this point, they essentially equipment less these units, that basically because they kind of went through the two iterations of this, right? So first one is Balaklia Izum area, and then again Liman. And so at this point, as I said, two iterations, you pretty much basically very low and heavy equipment, let's put this way. And that's another reason why Russian troops are not being able to establish any like firm front line so far. So again, going back to initial idea, unless command decides to sort of sacrifice those troops, there is pretty much in the modern sort of warfare, what we're seeing is nearly impossible to catch troops in encirclement. That's probably one of the big takeaways from all of these experiences so far. Now let's just, so this is October 1st, when the essentially front line completely collapsed here, and Russian troops started withdrawing from first east of Kupiansk, and soon after they started withdrawing from Borova. So now let's, this is sort of on the second what's going on. Now let's move south. Let's see what's going on the North Donbass front line. Things here are, well, as a broken record, the same. Wagner mercenaries continuing their attacks that are basically just pulling them deeper into the potential pocket, and that's the basic essence of all of these attacks. Nevertheless, they continue doing it. As you can see, typical areas: Soledar, Bakhmut, this area south of Bakhmut. No major changes here. Now let's look at what's going on the central Donbass front line. Things here are more or less the same, typical also areas. This Piske salient, New York now, for unclear reason, but that's essentially pretty much what's going on here. Again, what's going on, who replaced 66 Brigade is unclear. As soon as that information is available, I'll put that unit here. Potentially, this could be one of the newer units that finished training in the UK, or just newly formed unit. Unclear at this point who is standing there. Now let's look at what's going on the Zaporizhya front line. Things here are stable. As they say, this area is left for desert. Once situation in North Lugansk is cleared out, and then on Kherson bridgehead. So let's actually look at what's going on Kherson bridgehead, where there were advances here, and let's actually look at a little bit more detailed map. So Ukrainian troops, basically, this is what was original yesterday on October 2nd. Ukrainian troops were essentially in Oskil. They breached Russian front line, which was manned by very weak 80th Brigade. As I said, it's just 2 battalions, regular battalions, and then 1 reconnaissance battalion. It's just extremely weak unit. And so they were advancing along the road pretty quickly to Dudchany, and what ended up happening is, let's just see, so the way Russian troops finally managed to stop Ukrainian troops is there is kind of like a bridge / dam over this kind of like I wouldn't call it a bay, but I don't know how to call it right, but basically this kind of like river mouth or whatever it is. So they blew it up, and that actually stopped advance of Ukrainian troops here. And then Russian command pulled 1 regiment from 76 Airborne Division and put them sort of here, and essentially Russian troops control southern sort of portion of Dudchany, Ukrainian northern portion of Dudchany. So this is kind of like outcome of this super blitz offensive. So the 76 Airborne Division is basically holding on this Ukrainian advance from this bridgehead. So far, they were pretty successful, as you probably seen for the past whatever months or so. This has actually 3 regiments. So 2 regiments are sort of probably put here from Kalinievsk to Davidiv Brid. Now that they have 2 regiments instead of 3 regiments, remains to be seen if they will be as successful at stemming Ukrainian advances out of this bridgehead. Again, it's unclear what exact Ukrainian brigade attacking here. Could be 128. So as I mentioned, this is sort of the striking force here, these 4 brigades, because these 2 other ones that could be, but they really kind of tied up here straight on this, along this highway from Mykolaiv to Kherson, so they probably stay here. So this is something sort of like maneuverable group that Ukrainian command can sort of adjust and move around. So this is basically, it doesn't look that there's more sources on the Ukrainian side, so they just figure out the weakness on the Russian side. It's unclear at this point if Ukrainian troops will be able to advance further, because, as discussed many times, the airborne units are have much stronger fighting spirit. So they will probably fight tooth and nail until they completely close to annihilation. Then that's probably they will start retreating. At the same time, situation for Russian troops ammunition-wise becomes really desperate. So on the negative side, the ability of the artillery, which this division has artillery regiment, 76 and 7th as well, by the way. What this really means that support is dwindling, not to mention that actually now they need to split support of the one artillery regiment between two different areas. Let's actually look. I mean, it's not like you can sort of kind of like support with one regiment both. You have to split. So, and you have you pretty desperate on ammunition, and not to mention that though that artillery regiment is mostly 122 millimeter guns, D30. As far as I know, they don't have 152 millimeter guns there. So again, this kind of creates difficult situation. So there is high potential that Ukrainian forces can continue advance. It's very clear they will not be able to continue here in Dudchany because that dam/bridge was destroyed. So they kind of have to kind of attack here towards Novokamenka in this direction. So basically it remains to be seen. And again, this is 126th Brigade, which is not terribly strong. So there is sort of some opportunity, right? So again, the way it could happen is that first Ukrainian command is probably would like to sort of create either pocket out of all of this or squeeze these troops, which probably most likely they will just flee essentially, and there won't be any pocket because the distances here are pretty big. And Russian troops started to realizing that sort of, how to say, escaping is the right sort of choice. And Russian command is also doing right thing from that perspective, that preserving troops for the next fight is more important than standing the ground and standing the lost battle anyways. However, once this is cleared out, this is guaranteed that next front line, sort of straightened out front line, is probably going to go from this Chkalove through to Chervony Mayak, basically another sort of kind of like, again, I don't know how to call it, bay or whatever, or like river mouth here, as you can see. Well, it's not river mouth, it's just basically kind of like huge ridge that was flooded by the Dnipro River when they created a dam here. So that's kind of like the essence of this thing. So they kind of like, in a way, artificial creations in many ways. So anyway, so the straighted front line is probably going to go from Chkalove to this Novorossiysk and basically along this one. At that point, this whole area is going to be under pretty much even attacks, even like sort of like major, just simply artillery attacks and just rocket strikes and everything, meaning multiple rocket launchers. And I'm referring not just HIMARS, but just more sort of regular artillery units. So this is at that point, it may be turning into like self-fulfilling prophecy or sort of self-ignited reaction where Russian troops will be just or death spiral, better to say, where they will be forced to sort of like withdraw and actually quickly withdraw, because once Ukrainian troops start sort of attacking, have artillery basically control over this area with regular artillery, it will be nearly impossible to evacuate. So everybody realizes, including Russian command. So they will try to basically, at that point, quickly evacuate Russian troops to Nova Kakhovka. Will be interesting to see what happens to this dam. Hopefully it's not going to get blown up, because this is all of this huge amount of water will just flash down, and that could create like huge disaster. So again, remains to be seen. This is actually going to be a very dangerous moment in general, what's going to happen there. But this is basically will trigger this death spiral once Ukrainian troops get somewhere here, that this whole bridgehead will be evacuated in pretty quick sort of fashion. In the process, obviously, most of the equipment will be lost in the typical way. Some of their sort of manpower will be lost, but majority will be sort of kept for the next fight. So this is kind of like most likely outcome for this whole situation. And this is kind of like not, in the way it works, it's not going to be straight line. That's what I'm trying to kind of like explain, maybe in trying to do it in many different ways, maybe so far not successful, but this is not going to be happening in sort of straight, like sort of extrapolated straight line over time, but it's more like sort of exponential function where from a time perspective, right? So the loss of territory, loss of this is going to be going up exponentially for the Russian side pretty quickly. And this was probably first step in that exponential function that's going to happen. So once this, let's actually look at the whole big picture. So this is what's likely is going to happen, that Russian troops are going to lose this North Lugansk, or let's say majority of North Lugansk. Maybe they'll be able to keep this kind of like area here that's sort of covering directly Luhansk, because let's say reserves going to come, and they probably will lose this Kherson bridgehead. The chances of some sort of like tactical nuclear strike are also going exponentially, because Russian command will be just sort of throwing in a towel. Okay, we cannot do successfully with just regular conventional weapons. Let's just try something that's sort of unconventional that we have to sort of to change the tide in the war. And so again, and obviously everybody probably realizes this, we're getting into this situation of higher probability of some kind of like limited nuclear strike. At the same time, West was issuing very clear warning to Russia not to do that, because that will involve actually direct involvement of the West in this whole situation. But remains to be seen if this is going to stop Russian side. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and until tomorrow.